It is wonderful to be in Wisconsin. At one time, I lived in Wisconsin. I lived in Milwaukee. This was back in the 80s. Even then, there was a major animal rights group there. Citizens United for Animals, is anybody that's still around?
Animal Rights Network too, with Jennifer.
Okay. Well, I think I was in both of them. And I remember one day, this really good-looking guy came through town to speak for our group. And even though he was just cuter than a baby pig, he had this insane idea that he could start a sanctuary and take in abused farmed animals. And we thought he was nuts. And he was Gene Bauer. And now there's Farm Sanctuary and 100 other farm sanctuaries. So if you happen to be here today in Madison, Wisconsin, with an idea that somebody has told you will never fly, yes, it will, because our ideas do that, and there's never been a better time to be vegan. So how is it being vegan in the state where do your license plates still say the dairy state? That must be a little hard. How are you guys doing? You know, the one thing that I think is cool about coming from a state where practically everybody, I would think, has some relationship with a dairy farmer. Somewhere in their family, it's just part of the culture. So at least a vegan here probably does not have to explain to people that lactation is part of the bovine reproductive cycle. Because I can't tell you how many times somebody ostensibly intelligent, I mean with a master's degree in psychoneuro who's it's what's it, will say to me, well, my wife did have to have a baby in order to lactate, I'll give you that. And our cat, yes, cat had to have kittens in order to provide milk. But cows, I just don't know about that. I think they just do it. So hopefully you at least don't have to put up with that. So thank you for having me. Oh, I have to tell you one more little Madison story that goes way, way back. Early 80s. We would come from Milwaukee to Madison to visit a young vegan that we knew. She was younger than us, but we were young too. Everybody was young. And her brother had an organization right here in Madison during an election year back then that he called Vegans for Reagan. And it never really got off the ground. But as I think back to that, and people say, how is veganism different now than it was when you first started? Well, now, at least we can pronounce it, and a lot of the outside world can too. Okay, so I'm done with Wisconsin stories except to say thank you. Thank you for having me. So just so I get a sense of who you are and why you're here and what you would like to get from our time together, I'm just gonna take a little survey. This is not a how cool are you survey, because you're cool because you're here. But just so I know who's newer and who's an old timer, who is a diehard vegan? I am a vegan, I am forever a vegan, don't ever call me anything except a vegan. Okay. And who is a vegetarian, kind of looking in the vegan direction? Okay, welcome. And who is a healthy eating omnivore? You're looking at taking good care of yourself? Okay. And who is just here because your girlfriend drug you and you'll eat anything? Okay, all right. So in other words, we have the full gamut. But like they say in AA, the most important person in the room is the newcomer. So I'm going to speak to those people, and thank you so much for coming. So this particular talk is really about food. But there is a whole lot more to this vegan lifestyle, which I really think of as a beautiful, enlightened kind of lifestyle, where we're not just thinking about us, we're thinking about others, we're thinking about animals, the planet, hungry people who could use some of the grains and the soybeans that are being raised to feed livestock. So we've got this wonderful, broad view of things. And because the vegan lifestyle touches so many aspects of life, whatever your passion is, you can bring it in as part of your vegan living. So for example, if you're into fashion, there's just all kinds of amazing vegan clothing, shoes. One of the graduates of Main Street Vegan Academy lives in Dallas. And on the 5th day of the class, she was just frantically taking notes, and we couldn't figure out what she was doing. Well, she was drawing pictures of cowboy boots. And now she has this wonderful business called Cat Mendenhall Boots. And she just opened a brick and mortar in downtown Dallas. Just as brick and mortars are going the way of the dinosaur, a vegan store has opened now in Dallas, Texas. So if you're of an entrepreneurial bent, that's cool. If you got a business in your mind, it's so interesting to me that one way that we do have power in this world is where we put our money. And if people only wanted vegan food, that's what the marketplace would provide. If we only wanted vegan cowboy boots, that's what the marketplace would provide. So veganism is also about cuisine, wonderful restaurants. I was at Green Space last night. Green Space, is that right? Did I say that right? Green Owl, I'm sorry, Green Space is in Michigan. That's Dr. Joel Kahn's place. Yes, so much green in the world. So there's something here for everybody. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about doing this healthy. And even for that, I want to say there is a whole myriad of ways to eat. There is no vegan diet. If somebody says to you, I'm on a vegan diet, you say, no, you're not. Because veganism, by definition, is a way of living that, in as far as is practicable and reasonable, seeks to exclude exploitation of others of all species. That's all. Now, how you choose to eat within that is your very own business. I remember on one of my book tours, my Main Street Vegan tour, I was in Chicago and I was being driven around by this adorable young guy from Mercy for Animals. He was 22, I think, and he said, I don't know why anybody has trouble going vegan. I mean, if I want a pepperoni pizza, I have a vegan pepperoni pizza. If I want a chili cheese dog, I have a vegan chili cheese dog. And I'm thinking, if I did that, I would be in a hospital. But you know, he's a 22-year-old guy, and I'm a woman of a certain age, and so we have different needs, and different things are reasonable and appealing. So it's not like you join some kind of cult, and you got to eat the way that the guy said in the first book you ever read. There's a whole array of how to do this, and your way is right for you. So I'm going to tell you what I do. So I'm going to call on my various helpers out here, and they're going to say a sentence, I, because it is true for me, but any of you who want to adapt it and make that I be you, you can do that too. So who has number one for how we're going to get through the drive-through and end up loving those greens? Yes.
I surrendered to the reality that every day for the rest of my life I would be asked, but where do you get your protein?
Thank you. If anybody didn't hear that, step number one, I surrender to the reality that every day for the rest of my life I will be asked, but where do you get your protein? One of my favorite answers comes from Marty Davy. She's a registered dietitian who teaches for us at Main Street Vegan Academy. And she says that her favorite answer is, well, where do you think I get it? Because obviously, if you're upright and in good health and you haven't died, you're getting it somewhere. So that causes the other person to have to think. And chances are they'll say, well, peanut butter? And you say, yeah, because a peanut is a legume. It's like a bean. So of course there's concentrated protein in the peanut butter. There's concentrated protein in all the beans. Did you know? And then, you know, if you haven't lost them, this is the art of answering the vegan question. If that's all they wanted to know, they were really asking you about concentrated protein. If they start to wander, you stop right there. If they lean in a little bit like, well, wow, that's interesting, I never thought about that, then you can move on a little bit. And you can say something like, did you know that protein is in everything that grows up out of the ground? There is an internist in Santa Rosa, California named John McDougall. He was just on my podcast this very week. And way back in 1985, he put $10,000 in a bank account for any physician or dietitian who could come up with a diet based on a variety of whole plant foods that was deficient in protein or any amino acid. And do you know where that money is? Sitting in that bank account. And for the first several years, it actually drew interest. Because unless you are an active alcoholic who gets all your calories from alcohol, unless you are anorexic and literally in starvation, or in a famine area and in starvation, or if you only eat juicy fruits, only fruit, and nothing else ever. Some people call themselves fruitarians, but they eat fruits and some nuts and some leaves. They're fine. Those are the only ways that you could get a protein deficiency. And it's so funny, our fellow humans, they'll say things like, wow, I'm sure glad I had that piece of fish. I was just feeling so protein deficient. It's going to take them 24 hours to digest that and get anything out of it, much less protein. Protein is for growth and repair. We're through growing, hopefully. Yeah, we need some protein for repair. Nobody is saying you don't need it. It's just that you need what you get in a nice, whole, plant-exclusive diet. Should be end of story. It won't be. They'll ask again. And one of the other great secrets to this question is to act as if you have never heard it before. So instead of, just say, what a great question. And you know what? I had that question too when I started out. And you know what? We did. So who's got number 2? Yes.
I developed fear of frying.
Yes, I developed fear of frying, and this is a very important fear. You know, fear is generally not a good thing unless you are being pursued by the bad guys, and then it gives you that adrenaline and you can run away. Fear of frying means that I have come to see that food does not need to be drenched in glops of oil and made crispy. Now, does this mean that crispiness is a thing of the past? It doesn't have to be. Who's got an air fryer? It's a wonderful new little invention. My friend and actually co-author of the cookbook, the Main Street Vegan Academy cookbook that we have coming out late this fall, J.L. Fields has written the vegan air fryer. It's an amazing device that you can use either no oil at all or just a little bit, and you put in your French fries or your whatever it is, and it tastes fried. Now, I haven't eaten fried food in so long. I don't care. I have a little New York kitchen. I don't need another appliance. But if I did, if I missed that, how wonderful that that now exists in the world. So what the other thing of fear of frying will do for you is that it will get you away from the fast food culture. And fast food is a killer. When you think back to the year that most experts say the obesity crisis started in the United States, it's pretty much 1980, give or take a year or two. So let us think historically, what was going on in 1980 that was different from how people had lived before that? Does anybody want to venture a guess? Have an idea? Well, Well, computers, I didn't have a computer, but they were certainly in development. We have more TV stations. I mean, when I was a kid, we had 3 networks, then 4, and then all of a sudden we had 50,000, and that was about that time. You know what else happened? Only very, very rich people, and this was in the late 80s, had cell phones, great big cell phones. If you see that old movie Wall Street, there's this scene where he's walking down the beach and his phone is like this big. But we did end up having more phones in the house. It used to be if the phone rang and you were upstairs or downstairs, you had to run to get the phone. It also was the time, this was post-women's liberation movement, so more women were out working, and the family dinner wasn't happening the way it had in the past, and kids would come home and have access to food. That's one thing. Another thing that happened around that time that really contributed to the obesity epidemic was that a lot of experts and quasi-experts got into this thing about grazing. Eat all day long. Eat, 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 eat. Eat 6 or 7 or 8 small meals, just graze and graze and graze and graze. But guess what? We were grazing on addictive food, and many of us could not stop. Many of us still have not stopped. So one thing that I have found very helpful for me as a recovering food addict is I eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I eat when it's time to eat. I live when it's time to live. And I've kept off 65 pounds for 33 years, and I don't diet or suffer or worry about it. So that was one of the things. But then the other thing, and maybe the biggest thing that happened around that time in our history, was fast food. Now, I went vegetarian so long ago that I may be one of the only people on earth who never had a McDonald's hamburger. Seriously, I had White Castle, I remember those, and they've got vegan hamburgers now. White Castle, my gosh, and almond milk at Dunkin' Donuts is in a new and wonderful world. But anyway, the fast food came onto the scene, and so people started eating food that wasn't food, fried and not just fried, but fried in old oil that had been sitting there forever. So fear of frying, if you're gonna be afraid of anything, make it that. Who's got number 3? Hi.
I came to see that green was God's favorite color.
This is true. I came to see that green was God's favorite color. Think about it. There's more of it than anything else in nature. And when you start looking at the nutritional components of foods, the greens, and the darker the greens, the more of it, they are packed with every kind of healthy thing. Now, all the colors are fabulous. The purples and the oranges and the reds and the yellows, they're just all full of antioxidants and really great stuff. But it's the greens that give us this incredible hemoglobin, that give us all kinds of minerals and phytonutrients, and phyto means plants. So these are nutrients that are in the plant to protect the plant, but when you eat them, you get them too. And back to that protein question, do we all know that per calorie, dark leafy greens have more protein than beef? Now, they don't have a lot of calories, I'll grant you, but still, that is pretty astounding. And these raw food people that are really just eating vegetables, fruits, and some nuts, most of their protein actually comes from the greens. So what do you do with greens? Oh my gosh, what don't you do with greens? I have to tell you that even my first 15 years as a vegan, I didn't understand about greens. I still lived, but I'd probably live another 5 years if I'd known about greens. I really got into greens when I went to an Ethiopian restaurant in Los Angeles. Do you guys have Ethiopian food around here? That is my favorite cuisine. And this is another thing for new people. If you're worried about where am I going to go out to eat, just find international restaurants. Because most cultures in the world, not France, but most, have come up with a wonderful vegetarian cuisine. So in Ethiopia, it's because the Christian population there takes Lent very seriously, and everybody is vegetarian 6 weeks of the year. So just as the first mock meats, sometimes people will go, oh, I don't eat fake meat. Well, I do sometimes. But the first mock meats were developed by Japanese Buddhist monks. They wanted to be vegetarian, and in fact, we'd call it vegan because they don't do dairy in that culture. But for their religion and their belief in ahimsa, harmlessness, reverence for life, they weren't eating animal foods, but they missed the foods they grew up on. I mean, everybody does. We get imprinted with, oh, this is normal and this is what I like. So those Japanese Buddhist monks over 1,000 years ago learned how to texturize these plant proteins and make things that seemed like meat and fish. Really interesting, huh? So I had never had Ethiopian food. We didn't have one in Kansas City where I lived at the time, a restaurant. We do now, although I don't live there now, but whatever, too much information. I'm in LA, and we go to this Ethiopian restaurant, which my daughter, who was then 6, was just crazy about, because in Ethiopia they believe that forks are weapons and it's rude to eat with a fork. So they eat with this wonderful stretchy bread, a sourdough kind of crepe called injera. So of course my daughter wanted to go back every day. And the best of the best were the greens called gomen, highly spiced kale, collard greens, dark, leafy, wonderful greens. So when we got back home, my daughter wanted me to reproduce these. And I had always just kind of, do you ever have this in the supermarket? You walk past some kind of vegetable you've never had before, and it's like you don't see it. It's like, I don't understand that. It's sort of like if you're in the library and you walk past the nuclear physics section. No, I didn't. And that was how I was with some of these vegetables I hadn't used before. But it opened up an entirely new world. And it's so easy. You just, like for kale, you just take it off the stem, and your dog may love the stem, my dog does, and you just steam it. A little bit of garlic, a little bit of olive oil if you use that, little soy sauce maybe. That's really all you need to do. Now, if you really like it with bacon in it, I personally do not use coconut oil because it's a highly saturated fat, and I come from a family history of heart disease and high cholesterol. But there is a product called Magic Vegan Bacon Grease. Does anybody know this product? Well, you can check it out online. It's basically coconut oil, which is a saturated fat, kind of like lard or bacon or something like that some people like to put in the greens. And it's got some flavoring and nutritional yeast and whatever to give it a little kind of pork kind of flavor. So are you going to leave and say, yeah, that woman said we should have a whole lot of coconut oil and saturated fat? No, she didn't. I just said if it's going to get you from pork to vegan, check the stuff out. You know, we move in whatever ways we need to move to get where we want to go. But mostly the way I get greens is in a giant salad. I buy my salad bowls at a restaurant supply house because nowhere else do they make salad bowls that allow for sufficient tossing. So if you were here for the previous talk, Ellen Chaffee-Jones, who was PETA's sexiest vegan over 52 years ago, this is a hot festival, let me tell you. At least in the geriatric age groups. So I get this giant salad bowl, and then I make a salad with oomph factor. Because one of the other questions you'll get when you first go vegan is people will say, oh, I guess you eat a lot of salad. And, you know, I want to say, and I guess you eat a lot of corpses, but I don't. I don't say that. Because people have this idea that a salad is punishment. It's what you eat, you know, when you're on a diet or something. It's a piece of iceberg lettuce and a wedge of an anemic tomato. No, no, no. That was that salad back then. This salad is every kind of amazing, interesting green. And some you'll like more than others because they run the flavor gamut from something like Bibb lettuce that if you chew it enough is actually sweet to something that's really, really bitter. Some of the curly kinds of endive and greens of that nature. So you put more of the ones you like and just a little bit of the ones you don't like, and when they're mixed with the ones you like, you love everything. And then you put in some of these other colors so that your salad really is the rainbow, and you give it some crunch with some nuts or seeds or avocado. Avocado is absolutely amazing. Every day, if you follow the popular press that follows the scientific studies, they come up with something else that avocado is good for. They were looking at extracting a component from avocado as a breast cancer drug. I mean, it's an amazing, amazing fruit. It's very rich. You don't have 2 of them in a day. You probably have a half of one in a day, and maybe not every single day. But when you do, oh, that wonderful richness just tides you over. And then something I like to do with a salad is put something cooked in it. So some potatoes or some sweet potatoes or steamed broccoli. And that just gives it a little more substance. Now, my favorite dressings are based on nuts. And if you do, oh my goodness, if you come to the book table and sign up on my sign-up sheet, I will send you a handout that has the recipe, my favorite nut-based recipe in it for salad dressing. And for those of you who don't want to consume any oil, there is a magical product you might want to know about, and it is called seasoned rice vinegar. Who's on to seasoned rice vinegar? Okay. It's in the vinegar section, and it's just vinegar, but it has a little bit of sugar and a little bit of salt, and in some miraculous way, it ends up tasting rich and oily. So you can just put it on a salad all by itself if you don't have any other dressing made, and it's pretty darn good, especially if you've got some avocado in there to give you a little bit more of the wonderful fatty acids that we do need, certainly in moderation, but we need them. Okay, greens. Thank you, God, I like that color too. Next one, were we at 4? Hi, where's 4?
From lean cuisine to bean cuisine.
Yes, I switched from lean cuisine to bean cuisine. And what that really means is going from so much of the packaged processed to more basic. Now, does that mean that I don't work and I have all kinds of time to cook? No, not at all. But it doesn't take any more time to open a can of beans than it does to stick a prepared meal in the oven. Beans are miraculous. Beans are one of the few foods that have been shown in well-documented scientific studies to extend life. They did a study that looked at people in 5 different countries so that they couldn't say, well, it's sort of an ethnic bias or whatever. 5 different countries, Japan, Sweden, all over, and they tried to figure out what these centenarians had in common, and it seemed to be beans. Now, what's interesting is the people in Sardinia were eating chickpeas, the people and fava beans and things like that, the Mediterranean kind of diet. And in Japan, it was soybeans, tofu. There's a kind of brown bean that they eat in Scandinavia. But the bean eaters lived longer, did better. So we know that beans are full of protein. We already said that. But beans also have some other attributes that are incredible. And one of those things is called resistant starch. What resistant starch is something that the body doesn't digest, and it helps people to lose weight. All my life, the first 32 years of my life, all I wanted was a food that would make me lose weight. Instead of all these people saying, don't eat, I wanted, tell me what I can eat. Well, guess what? It was beans. Didn't know that at the time, but beans totally rock. If you have a problem digesting beans, start with the little ones like lentils and kind of work your way up. Start with smaller amounts. Chew them really well. Worst case scenario, go to the drugstore or the natural food store and get yourself some Beano. Beano used to not be vegan. It used to come in tablets that were coated in some kind of fish something. Well, now they're vegan. And you can get tablets or you can just get something you suck on. And that is going to help your body get used to this higher fiber diet if you're used to more of a standard American diet. Beans also have something that is called the second meal effect. And what that means is that when you eat beans with another food that is maybe higher glycemic and is going to make your blood sugar go up a bit more, the beans are going to keep that from being too much of a spike. But guess what? What if at your next meal you don't eat any beans and you have a real high glycemic kind of meal? Guess what? The beans you had at breakfast, when you had those beans on toast and grilled tomato like they do in the UK, that's going to help you at lunch. So for anybody that's been told your A1C or your blood sugar is kind of edging up there, this is certainly something to try to increase your beans and see how you do. We're certainly not prescribing here with food, but the fact is Plants are powerful. Most of the medications on the market today were derived at some point from a plant, from a seed, from a bark, from leaf. And so if you just eat the food, then chances are you're going to get lots and lots of benefits. It is the ultimate magic of plants. Number 5.
I stopped dissing carbs and finally got full.
Woohoo! That is a big one. I stopped dissing carbs and finally got full. 2 days ago, my assistant and I were at the office supply place getting the certificates printed, the graduation certificates for our next Main Street Vegan Academy class. And the young woman behind the counter saw that it said vegan, and she said, I'm trying to be vegan, but oh, I've got to cut out those carbs. Which told me, number one, she's a little bit off on what vegan is, and she's a little bit off on what carbs are. But it's not surprising, because almost everybody is, including people who ought to know better. You'll hear people say things like, oh, I was doing so well, and my cholesterol was down, and everything was good, but it was those carbs that got me. You know, the pizza and the ice cream. The bulk of calories from pizza, ice cream, cake, pie, cookies, all these things that people call carbs, they're not carbs. It's fat. And so what becomes addictive in that world that most people are calling carbs is a fat sugar or a fat salt combination. And whatever is there from the carbohydrate world is just the carrier. So let's think about it. Let's think about a potato chip, which is really a blasphemous thing to do to a potato, but for sake of argument, we've got the fat that gives it that wonderful kind of mouthfeel. Why do we love fat so much? Because in prehistoric times, we were mostly starving. And so when we got a hold of some kind of fat, when we got a hold of a carcass that the carnivores had run away from, or when we got a hold of some nuts, these were very high value finds because we needed that fat for concentrated calories so that we would live longer, at least live to reproduce. So we got the fat, and then we've got the salt. Now, sodium is a naturally occurring substance. We absolutely need it, but we have gone crazy in this culture for the salt thing. So basically, because just having vegetable oil and salt would be a little bit gross, you've got to have a carrier. So we're going to slice that potato really, really finely so that it soaks up all of that fat, and that fat glues the salt onto the potato chip. Yes, there is a tiny little bit, a few calories of carbohydrate in that potato chip. But if anybody in your presence ever again calls it a carb, you must correct their ways. It's just not. And it's the same with, let's take a cookie. Now, everybody likes a good cookie every now and then. And I think anybody who doesn't is not speaking truth. But when you look at a standard cookie, what is it? It's some flour, yeah, but that's the carrier for the butter, the coconut oil, the whatever kind of fat there is, and the sugar. Whether we're talking sugar, maple syrup, honey, whatever, don't blame the flour. Just like the potato chip, there are a few calories from carbs in your cookie. It's mostly fat. So we've got these things going on that confuse people. And when you say that you're going on a plant-exclusive diet, that you're going to be a vegan for a great number of reasons, and part of that means that you're not going to be eating animal foods, you're going to be eating plant foods, somebody is sure to say, well, that's a lot of carbs. Aren't you afraid you're going to gain weight on all those carbs? Well, let's think about that. Let's think about people who have traditionally eaten a lot of carbs. The first place that comes to mind for me is China. Great big country, lots and lots of people. Until 20 years ago, what did a Chinese person from China look like? thin person. That, I mean, when I would say, visualize a Chinese person in China, are you going to think of somebody with extra weight? You just don't. Because traditionally, throughout the continent of Asia, for centuries back, what were people basing their diet on? Rice in the north, wheat in the south. And sure, they weren't vegan, but they weren't having dairy products, and they were having some meat, some eggs, more fish in the coastal regions, but the bulk of the diet was the grains and the vegetables. And you can look at any traditional culture around the world. This is how people have eaten until very recently. And the more recently your ancestors were eating a plant-based diet and you just come over here and switch, it affects your health more adversely sooner than the people who have been eating this way for several generations. So, the best foods on earth are carbs. If I say to you, is kale good for you? What would you say? And if we say to the person out there who's afraid of carbs, is kale good for you? What are they going to say? Yeah, I mean, you know, it's green. We know it's got to be good. But if you say to them, it's primarily a carbohydrate. Well, I don't mean that kind of carbs. Well, then you better be very specific about what you mean. So, we need to have enough to eat. We need to feel full, because if we don't, one of two things is going to happen. One is we're going to go back to the status quo, and we're going to be one of those people who say, yeah, I tried that vegan thing. Didn't really work for me. But if you really get in there and see what it was, one of two things happened. Either she got a new boyfriend. That's often what happens. There's some kind of relationship thing. Or people just didn't eat enough. Because you see, when you're eating a standard American diet and you're having your piece of meat, well, that's a lot of fat and muscle. That's, you know, takes a long time to digest, stays with you a long time, takes a long time to chew. And then you're going to have maybe fried potatoes, something like that, that's more fat, that's heavy. And if you even have a vegetable, say you're going to have broccoli, chances are it's going to have a bunch of cheese melted on it, so you've got even more fat, and then maybe you're going to have some kind of heavy dessert. There's not a lot of bulk there, but there's a lot of heavy. And then you see something online. Maybe you see how animals are treated. Or you watch Cowspiracy and you say, this planet is not going down on my watch. And so you get your same little plate out and you put your little bit of salad and your little bit of rice and your little bit of beans and your apple, and you eat it, and 3 hours later you're thinking, I'm not sure I like this. It's because you need more food. So, salad, this much. Cooked vegetables, this much. Beans, this much. Whole grains, this much. Nuts and seeds and avocados, less, because it's more concentrated. And there you go. So you don't have to be hungry anymore. I spent 30 years either hungry or binging. And I don't know which one was better, because they were both awful. And this is a way that you eat and you have enough, and it's fine. There is a wonderful blogger who calls herself High Carb Hannah. I don't know Hannah, but I'm so glad she's out there because she's gorgeous. And when people find her site, they see, oh wow, High Carb Hannah. Huh, never would have thought that. Who's got my next number? 6? Is it 6? Yeah.
I realized I'd be nuts not to eat them.
I would be nuts not to eat them. And you would be nuts not to eat them, in my opinion. And we're talking nuts. Nuts, like beans, have been shown to be life extenders. When they look at a whole lot of people who do well versus a whole lot of people who don't, one of the things that has stood out in several studies is the consumption of nuts and seeds. Now, does that mean eating nuts all day long? Of course not. They are concentrated. I rarely eat nuts, but I will put ground flax on cereal or in smoothies. Flax is a wonderful source of omega-3 fatty acids, which we tend to be low on. And I'll also put some walnuts on oatmeal or even in a salad. Walnuts are a magical nut because they have a shut-off factor. Some people say, oh, you know, I like nuts, but God, I could eat them all day long. Not walnuts. Walnuts are packed with this, you've had enough, you stop. But most of the time when I eat a nut, it's because I've made something out of it. So I make a ranch dressing based on cashews. There's another wonderful recipe based on a little almond meal. I make another dressing that is based on tahini, which is sesame seeds, and seeds are sort of nuts, they're just smaller. I also use the raw cashews. So who's into raw cashews? They're cheap if you buy them in bulk and you buy the pieces instead of the whole ones. And you can make all kinds of things out of cashews. You can make a beautiful cream for a fruit salad, or you can make a savory white sauce for like a Thanksgiving green bean casserole. You can make a wonderful gravy for mashed potatoes, all out of cashews. So we'll use it for cooking. We're not going to just sit and eat nuts all day. But you kind of get the idea. So if you only remember one thing from this talk, remember this: salad, cooked vegetables, beans, and I left the fruit out. Fruit, whole grains, fruit, kind of interchangeable in your amounts, and nuts and seeds. So there's plenty of food, and there's plenty of ways to use these foods in the kinds of dishes that you're used to. All you have to do is Google vegan whatever it is. Vegan meatloaf, vegan burritos, vegan pumpkin pie. And you can even get more specific. You can do low-fat vegan burritos, low-sugar vegan pumpkin pie. It is amazing what people have come up with. So the world is out there, the culinary world, the world of health, the world of compassion. It's all ours, and I gotta tell you, I did not know that I would remain as excited about life at the age of 67 as I am, but I am. And it's largely because of living and eating the way that I do and the way that many of us do. So if you need help, just find somebody who said they were vegan and say, help me out. Okay, number 7, lucky 7.
I accepted that fruit is nature's word for dessert.
I accepted that fruit is nature's word for dessert. Didn't used to think that. In fact, I remember trick-or-treating and those people who put an apple in my bag. I always thought, those are the people who hate children. Well, I've changed my tune. Because again, one of the foods that whenever people are having premature morbidity and premature mortality, what morbidity means is what happens to most people in the modern industrialized world. They don't die early necessarily, although some people do, but they live in this state of ill health and disability on 5, 10, 15 different medications. That's not what any of us wants for our so-called golden years. So what is one of the things we can do to live well as long as we live? That is to eat fruit. Now, some people are afraid of fruit because they have heard it has too much sugar. Be honest, who has ever been afraid that fruit had too much sugar? Okay. George Washington out there, you guys talked about the cherry tree and you raised your hand about the fruit. Fruit is packaged as a beautiful whole. Yeah, there's sugar in it. You know what else there is in it? Fiber. Lots and lots of fiber, which we tend to be very low on in the standard American diet. It also has water. It also has vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, little bit of fat, little bit of protein. It's a beautiful whole package. And yeah, you can eat it. Talk to your doctor, of course, if you're diabetic, but if your doctor tells you you can't eat fruit, I would actually get a second opinion. Because the literature is so clear that virtually everybody can eat some fruit. Now, are some fruits better than others? If you're looking for super duper antioxidant mega power to keep you young and jumping tall buildings at a single bound, I actually took up aerial yoga for my 65th birthday. So yeah, it's not quite tall buildings, but it's close. Very best fruits that are in common usage are berries. Now, berries, unfortunately, are very highly sprayed, and so if you can possibly afford organic, get organic berries and organic greens for that matter. I don't like it that the healthiest foods in the world are the ones that we really ought to be getting organic. But look at it this way. If you're no longer buying junk food and soda and all that kind of stuff, you're no longer buying cheese and meat, you're no longer going through the drive-thru and getting all kinds of stuff. There is some extra money there. And so maybe you could put that on organic berries and organic greens. And if you can't, then just wash it like crazy, say a prayer, and eat. Because there is more good stuff in there than they can spray out of it, and that's for sure. So, blackberries are the highest antioxidant fruit in common usage. I'm not crazy about blackberries because I don't like those little seeds, but now that I have this information, I am going to work to befriend blackberries more. Pomegranate, they're really like little seeds. That's another great one. The deep, dark colored berries and fruits. Raspberries are really good, so are blueberries. Here's a little money-saving tip. The frozen organic wild blueberries, one company is called Wyman's, are cheaper year-round than the fresh ones. And when you're making a smoothie, certainly, or a pie or something like that, it's going to be just as good to have the frozen ones, and in a smoothie maybe a little bit better, and you save some money. The National Institutes of Health came out about 10 years ago saying that if a person were to eat a cup of blueberries a day, it could postpone or perhaps eliminate their ever coming down with Alzheimer's, even if they carried the Alzheimer's gene. And I remember thinking when I went to my store there in New York City and saw that blueberries were $7.50 a package, wow, we are going to have a lot of very alert old rich people 30 years from now. Okay, so berries are absolutely cool. And if you are a nutrition nerd and you want to know the highest antioxidant food on the planet, it is the Indian gooseberry, also called amla. Now, we don't seem to get those imported over here fresh, but you can get it at Indian markets and online powdered. Has a citrusy taste. You can put it in your smoothie, and it just blows any other kind of antioxidant, even berry, out of the water. So the berries are the advanced class, but all fruits are good. And in terms of sweetener, if you don't want to use refined sugar, very good idea not to do that. Pure maple syrup is nice in some recipes, but whenever I possibly can, I use whole dates, medjool dates, because that's actually a whole food. Really sweet, but if you're going to be sweetening something anyway, you may as well use a whole food. And you can also get date sugar, which is basically dehydrated dates ground up, and you use it with a spoon. So, fruits, berries, number 8.
I abandoned inhibition and spiced things up.
I abandoned inhibition and spice things up. We all need to do this. This thing happened this year with my annual checkup. It's always good. I'm very lucky. My whole family, both sides, long before they got to be my age, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, heart attack, stroke, diabetes. I mean, just, in other words, I come from an American family. But thank you, God, I don't have any of that stuff. And so every year when I go and get all my levels, I don't expect I'm going to see anything bad. But this year he said, wow, all your inflammatory markers have gone down. It's like, well, you didn't tell me last year that they were up. I guess he just figured, you know, they're in the normal range, who cares? But he said, what have you done differently? And I thought, nothing. And then I remembered, yes, I have been using more spices. So when we talk about all those wonderful berries and all the great plant foods of color that have these wonderful phytochemicals and antioxidants, the most concentrated of all that stuff is found in the spices. So the most commonly used spice that is the highest in antioxidants is cloves. And also turmeric. Oh my gosh. Turmeric, people take it in capsules, but there's no need to, because all you need to do is just put some in your food. If you're making beans and greens, if you're making rice, just put in a quarter, half teaspoon of turmeric. Certainly in a curry or something like that, that's really what it's there for. Cinnamon, ginger, all these spices are so good. So what did I do that got way more spices into my diet and caused my doctor to be impressed, even though he eats meat? Well, it is my year-long smoothie. So if you're able to sign up for my list back at the book table outside, I will send you this recipe as part of the handout. And if you don't want to do that or don't have time for it, you can go to the website lighter.world. And it's a whole bunch of vegan experts giving their favorite recipes. You can just go to lighter.world and click in Moran, M-O-R-A-N, and you'll find me. And you'll find my 3 favorite recipes. And one of them is my Ayurvedic chocolate shake. So Ayurveda is a wonderful, venerable, ancient Indian healing tradition recognized to this day by the National Institutes of Health as a viable healing system. And they're really into spices. So I love to have a smoothie in the morning. And in the summer, it's really easy. You know, you can have a green smoothie or you can have a berry smoothie. But in the winter, you know, in climates like you and I live in, you get up, you look out at the snow, and you think, not so sure about the smoothie thing. That's when I revert to oatmeal, which is really, really good for you, but I'm not a giant fan. And then I discovered the Ayurvedic chocolate shake. So it's cold like a smoothie because you can put in a frozen banana, but you put in all these amazing spices and they warm you up. So you can go out in the snow and feel warm. So the spices that go into my Ayurvedic chocolate shake are cayenne pepper, ginger, nutmeg, cinnamon, and a little fresh ginger when I have it, so it's kind of double ginger, and cinnamon. And Dr. Michael Greger of nutritionfacts.org, if that's not a website you know, please write it down. It'll be on your handout. Great information about practically everything, and it all comes straight from the science. He suggests that you look for Ceylon cinnamon. This is cinnamon from Sri Lanka. It's a different strain of the plant because conventional cinnamon does contain a naturally occurring carcinogen. Not a problem if you just use it for baking or whatever, but if you're going to be having it every day, a half a teaspoon or something like that, for its antioxidant properties, do get Ceylon cinnamon. If you don't find it, they have it in international markets, and you can also get it online. Okay, number 9, getting down to the wire.
I started to drink from the fountain of youth.
Aha! I started to drink, but not that way, from the fountain of youth. And you know what that is? That is the spigot of a juicer. Who's into juice? Yay! You're my people. Now, some people, they're not into juice. They say it's a fragmented food. Well, you know what? An aspirin is fragmented from the white willow bark. But if I have a headache, I'll take the fragment. The juice is the richest nutrient source from those plants. And it's concentrated so that you can get a lot of it in a sitting. This is what else is amazing about juice. It changes what you want. I talk when I write about my recovery from food addiction, healing at the desire level. It's not, I really, 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 really want a Snickers bar, but I'm gonna have that orange. That's not gonna last, that's not sustainable. You've gotta kind of shift, so, whoa, I really want that orange. And that's what happens when you drink juice. I will challenge you to Victoria's Victorious Juice Challenge. Let us say that you are someone who, in the middle of the afternoon, has gotten into the habit of having a, let's see, soy half-calf mocha, hold the whip, and a monster cookie. And you kind of think 3 o'clock is the best time of the day because you know you're going to get your fix. And it is a fix. I go to Starbucks myself because they let you sit all day and work on your computer. But I do know that it is a drug dealer. And if you are at an airport and you see a big line and you worry, oh my gosh, the plane must be delayed, don't worry. It's not a delayed plane. It's the Starbucks. So, just like, I want my coffee, I want my cookie. If you can get yourself a fresh green juice. And some of the other juices are great too, the ones with carrot, the ones with beet, but green juice with lemon is a miraculous thing. So either fresh from your own juicer or in a bottle cold pressed, and no, they do not come cheap, I'll admit to that. But if you have that and you still want the mocha and the monster cookie, I don't know, I'll send you a picture of my dog. It changes you from the inside out. If you're interested in juice, watch Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead, enchanting film by a guy who is not yet vegan, but I call him Typhoid Mary because he's made more vegans than most of us would ever hope to because they got into juicing first and then they wanted the whole wonderful world of plants. Also, when you're thinking of things to drink, green tea, particularly matcha tea made from the powder. So when you are at Starbucks, maybe try a matcha latte. And then something that's even better is hibiscus tea. So you can buy that at the store. Red Zinger is largely hibiscus. You can get it at Starbucks. I don't work for them. I don't know why I brought them up so much, but it is there. And if you don't quite like the taste of it just in the beginning, they'll do a thing they call a hibiscus lemonade. You don't want that because that's a lot of sugar in the lemonade. You say you want an iced hibiscus tea with a splash of lemonade, and that'll make it taste really, really good. So drink as well as eat from the fountain of youth. Do you need to be drinking, quarts and quarts of water every day? It depends on how you choose your foods as a vegan. If you are somebody who eats a lot of raw food, you drink juice, you're having a lot of fruit, you're getting water, and it's pure water. And sometimes people will argue, spring water, distilled water, this kind of water. Fruit water and vegetable water both has the minerals and is naturally distilled. It's wonderful. So in a diet like that, you don't need to drink so much. If you're more a macrobiotic kind of person and you're eating a lot of cooked foods and a lot of grains and things that don't have water, drink more water. This is not rocket science. It's just listening and responding. Number 10, and I'll stop talking.
I learned that food is only one small part of what it means to be nourished.
That's a biggie. Food is only one tiny part of what it means to be nourished. We're nourished by so many aspects of life. We're nourished by the people who are around us, and you know what it's like to be around people that you just love to pieces, and then to be around people that you feel you kind of have to put on a show for. Very, very different. You want nourishing people in your life. You want a nourishing environment. Sometimes you move into a new place and it just takes a while to make it feel like yours. You want it to reflect you back to you because we're so delicate on the inside. We need this kind of stuff. And even when it comes to food, it's not just what we eat, it's how we eat it. So let's say you are going to get into green juice and you're going to make that for yourself in the morning. Or maybe you're going to make a wonderful year-round Ayurvedic chocolate shake. It takes no more time to put your juice or put your smoothie into a lovely stemmed goblet that will make you feel like $1 million than to put it into a plastic superheroes cup from the Taco Bell. But how you're going to feel about the experience is different. So nourish yourself and nurture yourself. And the very, very best way to do that is to do for others. And as a vegan, anybody new, anybody just looking at this and thinking, well, kind of, sort of, maybe I was also looking at paleo. Don't look at paleo. That's death. Look at life. Look at saving animal lives for sure and having a pretty good shot at saving your own. God bless you. Namaste.